The Department of Public Health and Human Services is pleased to bring you Aging Horizons. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, fraud, legal issues, veterans benefits, and caregiving. Aging Horizons is a program dedicated to inform and prepare Montanans on these timely issues, making a difference to you and your loved ones. Here now is today's program host.
Welcome to the Aging Horizons. Today we're at the Governor's Conference on Aging, and we're going to be speaking with Paul Greenwood. He's a retired prosecutor on elder abuse, and we're going to be asking him all about elder abuse, what it looks like nationwide and what it looks like here in Montana. We're going to be talking about what you can do in your community, signs and symptoms to look out for, and all the major trends. So make sure you stay tuned to Aging Horizons.
I think the most pleasant surprise when we turned 65 and signed up for Medicare Part B was finding out about our Welcome to Medicare preventive visit.
It was free, and it gave us the opportunity to visit with our doctors and establish a plan for our health going forward.
They reviewed our medical history, measured our height, weight, blood pressure, and counseled us on other risk factors.
To learn more about Medicare's free or low-cost preventive and wellness benefits, call your local SHIP counselor at 800-551-3191. I mentioned it's free, right?
Twice.
This is Bill. He just received his new Medicare card and is following some simple rules to protect himself from fraud. He knows to never give out his Medicare, Social Security, or bank number over the phone. And this is Nancy. She knows that to detect any problems, she always reads her Medicare Summary Notice or Medicare Advantage EOB to make sure the billing is correct. Both Bill and Nancy know that anything suspicious can be reported to Montana SMP at 1-800-551-3191.
Receiving help for Ella has been life-changing, and the best word for it is relief. I was the therapist, I was the aide, and I couldn't be the mom because emotionally you're just to your wits' end, you're trying to survive.
I provide care for the Harrises, specifically their daughter Ella. Respite care is extremely challenging, but the rewards that you receive from it are 100 times more than working with a child that doesn't have special needs. Once they get something, it's everything. It's a you celebrate. You don't just enjoy those moments. You celebrate every moment that you get, that you guided them to that next step.
Respite. It's okay to need it. It's okay to want it. Will you provide it? Call 800-224-6034 or visit respite.mt.gov.
It went from survival to enjoying life and being able to be a mom again.
Brought to you by the Montana Broadcasters and this station.
Welcome to Aging Horizons, brought to you by the Department of Public Health and Human Services. I'm your host, Katie Lovell, and today we're at the Governor's Conference on Aging, and we're speaking with Paul Greenwood, who's a retired prosecutor of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Paul, thank you so much for being with us today. I have so much to talk to you about. So, Paul, you have spent your career prosecuting elder exploitation. Tell us a little bit about how you got started.
Yes, so I joined the District Attorney's Office in San Diego in 1993, and I had been, as you can probably tell from my accent, not originally from Southern California, originally from England. My wife is from San Diego, so because of health issues, we decided to come back to my wife's hometown. I joined the DA's office, and after 3 years of doing general prosecution, I was called into the boss's office. Isn't it funny that when you get called by the boss, you think you've done something wrong? Mm-hmm. But he sat me down and said, we've got a problem. He said, I've just had a call from Adult Protective Services blaming us and our office for ignoring a huge escalating crime called elder abuse. And I am honest enough to tell you that when I heard him say that, I literally asked him, what's that? I'd never heard of the term. He said, I don't know either, but I'm fixing that because I've just named you as the first head of the unit. And, you know, I thought I was going to do this assignment for 3 years. Sure. How wrong I was, Katie, because it became my passion for the next 22 years, and it's still my passion even though I've left the DA's office, because my mission now is to try to share the lessons that I've learned in the courtroom in those 22 years with a wider audience, such as the one today at the Governor's Conference on Aging in Great Falls.
Absolutely. Paul, I think one of the things that has been so wonderful about you being here, and then I've seen you speak several other times, is that I feel like you're part of the good, the new things that are happening in the world of elder exploitation. Can we talk a little bit about what other good things are happening?
Exactly. And you know, when I started out in January of '96, there was no resources. In fact, in the whole realm of prosecutors around the country, I could only turn to one person who I could consider to be a specialist in prosecuting crimes against the elderly. That has changed. The good news is that we are finally coming to grips with the fact that this is a recognized crime, that older adults are being exploited, are being victimized, are being targeted, and are being physically abused and neglected. And it's something that is now getting into the mainstream media much more. And so we've got to pay attention to it. And so that is happening not only across the country, but in smaller areas. And today is a perfect example. We've got a room packed with 250 members of our community who have an interest in protecting older adults in Montana.
Absolutely. Paul, one of the things that we just got to hear a little bit about are these elder exploitation teams, and I know that you were a resource in help setting those up. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yes, so historically in Montana there was one council in the eastern part of the state that was focusing on building relationships within the community, trying to figure out how that we can improve policies and then bring those to the legislature. Well, the current governor decided that needed to be broadened out to the rest of the state. So we now have these 4 councils covering the whole state, both rural and urban. And the purpose of these councils is to be a listening ear in their communities that they serve, to hear from the audience, like we did this morning, of ideas that they can then discuss amongst each other and then bring to the legislature maybe for improvement. One perfect example was that Mike Fanning gave this morning, which was getting a warning sheet that can be put up on Bitcoin ATM machines, which are now being put all over the state of Montana.
Not something you worried about in '96.
Exactly. Who'd ever heard of Bitcoin, right? So it's an evolving issue. And it takes just an idea and a concept that is brought to these regional councils that can then spread throughout the state.
And that is such a wonderful resource. And I think resources in general are really expanding. People have so many more places to look for information.
They do, and that's why I'm so glad for example, we had AARP on the panel today. The website of AARP is phenomenal. And then there's so many training opportunities that people can avail themselves of. Just the podcasts alone that people can listen to and then share that information with their next door neighbor or with their elderly grandmother or whoever it is. Because a lot of what this is, we need to know how the scammers operate. Sure. And having someone like Susan Bivens today come a real live survivor of a $250,000 exploitation, it's so important that we understand how they work and the language they use and the methods they use, so that if we hear things like that, we can then possibly be the person to prevent it from happening to somebody else.
Absolutely. You know, the scammers get smarter every day, but I feel like hopefully we do too.
We do, and it really comes down to education, awareness, using the media like we are today, right, with you, to get that message out to everybody. And it's not just to older adults.
Sure,
every person needs to hear this, and I think we should be starting to think about teaching this in high school, in community college, wherever the adults are gathered. They need to know this because they have grandparents, they have parents. And for example, I have a 24-year-old nephew, just graduated from college, and he's now in the job market. And his mother was telling me the other day that he's got a potential assignment overseas. Well, so I said, well, tell me more about it. Well, it turns out it's a scam, because what they were asking him to do on Zoom was to start putting money into this parent job application. So we were able to, through education, alert my nephew that this was a scam, and he's thankfully withdrawn from it before parting with any money.
Right, we're never too young, too old, or too educated to get scammed.
Exactly. Somebody made a good point today too, that sometimes pride gets in the way. Sometimes people will use all the wrong reactions. They might say, well, how could this person be so stupid as to fall for it? Well, you know, they're being a little arrogant by suggesting that they will never come to this themselves. But we're all a minute away from being drawn into something. It sounds good, it sounds urgent, it sounds like it's my family, and when that happens, our brain sometimes is left behind. Our heart takes over.
Absolutely. When we get back, we're going to talk more about the bad.
With as many as 1 in 10 Americans at risk for Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia, chances are someone you know and love will receive that diagnosis. When that happens, you may well feel devastated, but know that you are not alone. Help is available. You don't have to face dementia by yourself. Call the free 24/7 Alzheimer's Association helpline, 800-272-3900, for guidance and support.
It's been 27 years. I never thought I'd still be smoking, but here I am, COPD and all. I'm about to have a granddaughter. There's so much to show her, but I'm scared I won't be able to keep up like I used to. I kind of gave up on myself on quitting. But it's different now. I want to be here for her and for my daughter.
Every generation produces heroes, men and women who step forward to defend our country in time of need, no matter the personal cost to themselves. And though we can never fully repay them, we can make sure they have access to low-cost, long-term care when they need it. That's what Montana's Veterans Homes are all about. If you've got a hero in need in your family, call us. We can help.
This is Sergeant Jones. Please respond. I was separated from my squad. Requesting backup. Anyone? Please respond. I'm all alone here.
Welcome back to Aging Horizons. Today we're at the Governor's Conference on Aging and we're speaking with Paul Greenwood, who's a retired prosecutor on elder abuse and exploitation. So Paul, we talked a lot about all the good things that are happening in the world of elder abuse and exploitation, which sounds weird to say, but now I want to talk a little bit more about the bad. So elder abuse is a rising crime. Let's talk a little bit about why.
Yes, the demographics point to that very much so. And in fact, it's interesting that of all the Western states here in the United States, Montana is considered to be the oldest in terms of demographics and population. And part of that is because you live in such an attractive state. More and more Californians are retiring to Montana, bringing with them their equity from their sale of their house. You know, a house in San Francisco that was bought in 1962 is now worth $2 million. Free and clear. You're going to get people in their 70s moving from California because of, I just paid yesterday $6.27 for a gallon of gas before I went to the airport. And people are coming to Montana for the fresh air, but they're bringing their money. But as a result, the crooks are following them to Montana. So there is more and more targeting of older adults, and this is gonna keep going for years to come. This is the bad part of what we need to be aware of.
And I know in 2021 we had 4,900 cases of reported elder exploitation. Is that how many cases we actually had?
Absolutely not. You know, and this is the problem. We don't know exactly how many there are. I mean, some people have thrown out this statistic, 1 in 28 cases is reported. Okay, so let's just take 30 for an example. You multiply the 4,900 by 30 times to get a more accurate figure. And you ask yourself, well, why are they not reported? And again, this is the bad side of it. The crooks rely on silence. Too many people, unlike Susan Bivens here, are not willing to share their stories. They're not willing to tell their family. They will actually just absorb the financial harm and the loss without saying anything because they're too embarrassed. And that's what we're struggling with, is how do we overcome these barriers of silence?
And that silence, that not reporting, has so many unintended consequences for both the victims and for law enforcement. What are some of the barriers that we can overcome as a society to help get people into reporting?
It's a great question. I think it's to have an open dialogue where we're not pointing fingers at people, but at the same time accepting that sometimes the law enforcement response is inadequate.
Sure.
And that's based upon lack of training.
Yeah.
And that lack of training could be based on lack of funding. So one of the things we'll talk about probably in another segment is the ugly side, of things, which I'll get to. But concentrating now on the trainings, we need law enforcement to understand that these are not just civil matters.
Sure.
We need them to understand that Susan Bivens, when she wire transferred the money or gave it away in terms of other methods, she did not do that willingly. That's not consensual. She was deceived into putting that money and liquidating it. And that's one of the problems. Law enforcement will say, well, there's no crime here. You weren't forced to hand over the money. But it is a crime. But it takes adequate training, getting law enforcement and prosecutors in a room, in a summit, to understand this.
And one of the things that we've noticed after the COVID-19 pandemic is that the number of scams, the creativity in some of these scams is just exploding. What are some of the top scams that we're seeing today?
Yes, thank you. So the top two for me is the romance scam. Yeah. And that was born about through the pandemic too, because more and more people are looking for a relationship without the social connections. So the predators are out there, and they are getting invitations out there on Facebook Live, but through regular dating sites, but then using stolen identities to convince this suitor that they are with a military background, they've got a great occupation, and they're looking for love. And unfortunately, it's happening very, very consistently. Just on Friday, I got a call from a 67-year-old lady in California who has just, in the last month, wired $350,000 as part of a romance scam. The second one is investment scams. Yeah. And again, born about by the pandemic. There's a lot of isolation. The stock market is volatile. It's up one day, it's down the next. The scammers are coming in on that and convincing people they have now finally got the perfect formula as a counter to the stock market, and they want people to invest in all kinds of things which tend to be fraudulent.
Absolutely. The isolation and the fear that so many of us felt during the pandemic really was such a breeding ground for what scammers need us to feel to get into those scams.
Exactly. And now, because technology has made it so easy for you and I, on the click of a button, not even to go into a bank anymore, we can actually wire transfer money from our homes. And that's what the predators love, is because they can do it in this secrecy, and now also using this cryptocurrency that none of us really understand. Absolutely. And once it gets into cryptocurrency, it's very difficult to trace.
Absolutely. When we get back, I want to talk a little bit about the ugly side of scams and schemes. Paul, what is one of the biggest things that you see as an upcoming consequence of a lot of these scams?
Well, we've seen it in Susan Bivens' story this morning. Yeah. One consequence is dramatic lifestyle changes. Yeah. Another one is, and I'm afraid to say this, it's mental health issues for a lot of older adults who become victims of either physical or financial exploitation. And another one could be the draining on our society. It costs a lot to investigate these cases. It takes manpower, it takes resources, and if we're going to do our job and go to battle on this, it's going to require a lot more effort and a lot more resource to make that happen.
Absolutely. When we get back, we're going to tell you a little bit about the ugly side of financial exploitation, so make sure you stay tuned.
Today, class, we'll be discussing the term ombudsman, a word we borrowed from the Swedes and never gave back. Say you're a resident or you have a loved one in long-term care. Now, what do you do if you're not happy with the care and services you receive? You call your long-term care ombudsman, of course. Your ombudsman is available to support you and your rights. An advocate on your behalf could be the ticket. This is your home. If you have questions, the numbers right there below me have all the answers. Class dismissed.
I was diagnosed with diabetes in 1992, and I went into denial. It made me angry. I was a professional chef, and I didn't want to change my eating style. It took me a long time to get serious about managing my health. My perspective changed from resentment to one of loving my body, the container for my spirit. Getting help from my diabetes educator supported my goals of improved self-care. I want to feel good and have a great life. My diabetes educator helps me do this.
Did you just text me?
I didn't want to disturb you if you were sleeping.
Sleeping? I'm sitting right next to you, silly.
There you are. Hey, I found a couple of Medicare helping programs online that I think we ought to look into.
It says if we qualify, we can get help paying for our prescription drugs. Oh, and there's a program that can help pay our Part B premium.
To learn more about extra help and Medicare savings programs, call your local SHIP counselor today.
Maybe I better text him.
More fuels, more fires, more fear. You don't have to live in the forest to be threatened by wildfire. In 18 years, the number of fires per year has increased by 1,000 and tripled the acreage burned. Turn it around. Advocate for forest management. Form a group. Craft a plan. Mitigate the fire hazard. You and your community can't dismiss the trend, but you can mitigate the risk. FireSafeMT.org can help. Paid for by FireSafe Helena and aired by the Montana Broadcasters Association.
Welcome back to Aging Horizons. Today we're at the Governor's Conference and we're speaking with Paul Greenwood, who's a retired prosecutor, author about elder abuse and exploitation. We are going to talk about the ugly side of elder abuse and exploitation. Paul, I know we've talked a little bit about some of the long-term consequences, but one of the things I think we don't talk about enough is that death can really be a consequence of some of these scams and schemes. And I know as a prosecutor, you've really seen that. Can you tell us a little bit about that extreme consequence?
I can, and I'll do it from two angles. The first angle is when financial exploitation of the perpetrator leads actually to a homicide.
Sure.
And I've seen that happen too many times. It's particularly with somebody known to the victim, typically a son or a close relative. They have an addiction to drugs, alcohol, or gambling. They steal from their mother. Mother finds out. There's a confrontation and it ends up with a violent confrontation. And I've seen that aspect. The second type of aspect is where a victim spirals downhill. Yeah. Once they discover, for example, their life savings are gone, they give up the will to live. And I think there is a lot to be said in people living long lives because they have something to get up for every morning. Yeah. And it may be a grandchild, it may be a hobby, something that they look forward to. When a person becomes a victim, particularly of financial exploitation, who's an older adult, their whole world can crash around them. They lose trust in people. They say, I've got no more money left. What's the point in living? Now, ultimately, some have taken their own lives, and I've seen that happen.
Sure.
But other times, people simply give up, and as a result, they stop eating, they become very isolated, and the next thing you hear is they've passed away.
And I know that we've seen seniors, skipping meals or skipping necessary medications because they no longer have the funds to afford those things. Such an unattended or, not thought of, not talked about consequence of elder exploitation.
Right.
And then, Paul, I know that sometimes in domestic violence, when you are about to go to the police or go to ask for help, that becomes the most dangerous part. Is that what we see in elder exploitation sometimes as well?
Well, yeah, and this is where law enforcement and prosecutors need to step up.
Sure.
and work as a group together with adult protective services. APS are absolutely vital in this. And one of my pet peeves is that we don't fund adult protective services enough. Sure. In any state. And if you look at the number of child protective service workers compared to adult protective service workers, it's ridiculous. It's like 10 to 1. Sure. So the legislatures everywhere have got to fund APS. APS will then work with law enforcement and prosecutors and focus on the safety of the victim. Because you're right, there will be harassment, there'll be threats, there'll be fear of retaliation. And prosecutors need to understand that, get involved early in the game, where there's enough evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, file quickly, and then get protective orders to make sure that the victim can be kept in a safe place and free from any concerns that the defendant is going to come after them.
Absolutely. Community support, family support, so important during that time, as well as law enforcement support.
It is. And I really would urge your viewers to keep an eye out and keep an ear open for anybody in their neighborhoods, next door. If they feel that there's potential for elder abuse, don't hesitate to call Adult Protective Services and make that report. No one's going to blame you. If it turns out to be nothing, that's great.
Right.
No one's going to blame you for making that call.
Absolutely. Paul, I never like to end a segment on the bad, so let's talk a little bit about what we can do as community members, as people who are aging ourselves. What can we do to protect ourselves and our friends and family?
And we don't want anyone to be paranoid about this. You know, the golden years, as they call it, they are to be enjoyed. They are to be lived. And I think the good news is that we are doing things in Montana to make that happen, to protect older adults. But we all have a responsibility to take care of one another and just to keep our ears and eyes open. And as I say, the worst thing we can do is stay silent. So we need to be making sure that we take advantage of all those resources out there and make that call.
One of the wonderful tips that you gave in your presentation earlier was that no home should not have a shredder. That's not something I had thought of before as something to recommend. So really great actionable tips that we can learn to protect ourselves.
And there's so many other resources and tips like that out there on the web. For example, freezing your credit is a good tip for many, many people who don't need a new credit card, and that's one way to protect yourself.
Where should people look for resources?
Well, certainly through AARP, their website, through Adult Protective Services. You can call them up and ask for ideas and resources. They'll have links on their website. And the Attorney General's Office and the Consumer Protection Division, they have wonderful resources too.
Absolutely. And then, Paul, one of the things I always like to talk about is which government agencies are going to call you and ask you for personal information.
Well, that's it. I always say IRS will never call you. And we call it the government imposter scam.
Sure.
Medicare is never going to call you and ask you for an updated Medicare number. So whenever you get a call pretending to be from a government agency, the best advice is hang up.
Absolutely.
And if better than that, don't even pick up. Let it go to message. And then just delete the message if they say they're from a government agency.
Absolutely. Paul, I just want to thank you. You've given us so much great information, so much actionable information, and you've been such a resource to communities all across Montana. We just couldn't thank you enough for being here today and then every day for Montanans. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Katie.
I hope that you learned something about elder exploitation today. Make sure that you're taking the tools into yourself to make sure that your information is protected and taking care of yourselves, your community members, and the seniors that are in your lives, because it's important and it's something we can all do to protect ourselves. So thank you for staying tuned to Aging Horizons.
Special thanks to the Department of Public Health and Human Services for their continued support. Hosts on Aging Horizons are program specialists at the Montana Office on Aging. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions. For more information about Aging Horizons, call the Department of Public Health and Human Services toll-free at 800-332-2272.